Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. And we're going to get started in a long series of shows as we look at each position group on the team. Now that we've got the full 90-man roster, rosters seem to be almost set at this point. There'll be some additions, subtractions before training camp. But for the most part, I think this is the team that we're going into training camp with. Overall, today we're going to start with the quarterback group. We've got three guys to look at, starting with Gino at the top. Welcome in.
Yeah, three guys and three interesting guys. Like, typically you have one quarterback that is like, your starter and whatever, and then after that it's like, I guess we'll talk about these people. But for the Seahawks, like this year you've got three guys that are uniquely interesting for a show like this. Yeah, Geno Smith's the starter, and that's not gonna be an issue, and like no one's suggesting he's gonna lose that job because that's crazy. But that doesn't mean the other two aren't interesting.
Yeah, and I thought as we're having a conversation about Geno, we can have a conversation also about the position groups on the team that are kind of impacting him. Offensive line, the running back room, wide receivers. He's got all the weapons this year, for sure, and last year, Keith, I kind of wanted to look back a little bit and how we approached last year with him. Gino won that competition out of training camp. Drew Lock had COVID right at the end there that impacted his opportunity. Team felt confident. Pete Carroll was always confident in Geno Smith. I don't know that we gave that enough credit early on as to just how much that Pete was really in Geno's corner. And Geno came out swinging, and he played extremely well in the first half of the season, tailed off a little bit at the end. But, in retrospect, not a lot of that was his fault directly. A lot of that was attributed to some of the defenses we were playing. Also, the offensive line wore down a little bit towards the end. I thought that, they didn't commit to the run as much as they had earlier. There was a few different contributing factors, but overall, he had the best completion percentage in the NFL last year, fourth most touchdowns, eighth most passing yards, 4,200, set a franchise record for us there. Completions, 399 completions, tied for sixth in the NFL. Attempts, 572, which is a franchise record.
Which is interesting given that this was still a running team.
Yeah.
And
we just came out of the Russell Wilson era.
Yeah. And Russ was great when he was here. And so the idea that those were records, and you're like, well, why were those records if you come out of the Russell Wilson era? And then before that, I mean, really, if you think about it, the Matt Hasselbeck era, under Holmgren, they were throwing the ball all over the place. So why was this last year, the record year? Because it didn't feel like Geno was throwing the ball on every down, right? So
true, but I mean, he had a high completion percentage, so he was very efficient. The offense was very efficient.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's like it didn't feel like it was a record year, because usually you think of a record year, you got one of those teams that they don't have a running game, so they're throwing it on every down, and they're throwing for like 400 yards a game and everything. And instead, Geno was just very efficient all year, high percentage. But the other thing is they were able to string together drives. One of the problems, whether you want to say it's the Russell Wilson era or the Brian Schottenheimer era, one of the problems that they had was a lot of 3 and outs. And then they would, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and then a long drive for a touchdown. And they would do that enough that they would score a bunch of points, but there were a lot of 3 and outs between the points. And last year they just didn't have many of those at all. They were able to put together yards, even in their non-scoring drives. They were able to move the football a little bit, and just
So
a lot fewer 3-and-outs last year.
correct me if I'm wrong, but the last year that Russell Wilson played, and some of that was impacted on injury, but they had close to a 40% third down efficiency rating. And in Geno's year last year, it was closer to 48.
Yeah.
Just to put that in perspective.
Yeah, and I mean it's not just third down. Like third down is obviously the big thing, but part of it comes down to what do you do on first and second down? Because if you're 3rd and 10, 3rd and 8 on all your third downs, you're gonna have a lower percentage. But because of Geno's completion percentage and his ability to be efficient, they were in a lot more 3rd and 2s. And that's part of the reason why they were their numbers were higher. Because it wasn't just sandbox, go for the big play. Like there was an efficiency to his game that we kind of weren't used to during the Russell Wilson era.
Well, let me ask you this. How much do you attribute that to Shane Waldron and being in this offense now for his second full season, as well as Geno coming into that season, entering his third year with the team and just being comfortable?
I think that it had more to do with Geno than Shane Waldron. And what I mean by that is that the struggles before had more to do with Wilson than it had to do with Shane Waldron the year before. And because Wilson wasn't content to take the 4-yard completion or 5-yard, you know what I mean? He wanted things downfield and he would extend plays often well beyond when he should, trying to generate that big play. Now, when it worked, it was awesome, and that's why the team scored a lot of points, and why the team was, um, one of the better offenses in the NFL, during the Wilson tenure. But it wasn't efficient. Geno was much better at taking what the defense gave him, getting that 5-yard completion, following it up with a 4-yard completion, which you can see to 3rd and 1, and they can run it up the middle for the first down and move on. Wilson just wasn't content to do those things, and so I don't know if I don't want to contribute this to Waldron because I think Waldron did set Wilson up to do those things. Wilson just chose not to.
When it comes to some of the things that we wanted to see out of Geno Smith last year, and we went into the year, Keith, and I don't know if we need to remind everyone, but we thought this was going to be a 5-win team, and some of that was just historic Geno Smith. Even if he played to an historic average of what he was prior to 2022, we thought we were going to have just a middling offense and possibly be in a position to draft top 5, certainly top 10 overall in the draft, have an opportunity to get a quarterback. That was kind of the long-term vision.
Yeah.
It didn't happen that way. One of the things that Geno did, other than just being a game manager, is we wanted to see him win games, win close games, go out and be able to take, a final drive and make it happen. He did that a couple times last year. Really didn't have too many opportunities. He had, I think, a couple more additionally to that and came up short. But that happens in the NFL. I think overall, this was a 9-win team. It wasn't a superior team, a 12-win, a deep run into the playoffs type of a team. I wanted to gauge you this year, what your expectations are, where you think Geno is in this offense, and what can we expect from him going into 2023, considering the weapons that we've got around him.
Well, I think that we should expect improvement. I know he's an older player, and older players don't tend to improve. But he's going to be given another year, another another opportunity to get in and master some of the tiny details of what the team wants him to do. Another year working with Shane Waldron, where the two of them can figure out, hey, what can we do that can just make us better and use the talent better. And so I expect him to be slightly improved. I don't know if he's going to get to the 70% completion percentage again. I mean, that was crazy, but it's possible.
Let's talk about some incentives that he's got in his contract. His
Quite a
contract is
few.
incentive laden. He can
Yeah, it is.
earn another, 10, $12 million by reaching those, but most of those were set slightly higher than his historic year last year,
Mhm.
where he led the team in a whole bunch of different categories historically. And so it's kind of funny. They wrote that contract in a way where I thought, well, maybe that's, they did it so they wouldn't have to pay him that. You're
I
saying
don't know. I don't
slight
know if
improvement there is possible, and he may
I think it's
attain some of
true.
those.
Yep.
Wow.
I
This is so crazy to me because last year, if I heard these words coming out of your mouth, I would have dropped dead, literally.
I was
Um,
because I was not on the Geno Smith train. I was like, he we have seen Geno Smith. We have seen him for years on a bunch of different teams. None of them were good. Most of them were really bad. And why were we going, into this season with him as the quarterback? Like it just made no sense. But it just goes to show you we hadn't seen him really at all because he'd been mostly just on the practice field and on the sideline. And what Pete Carroll had seen was um, vast improvement and vast um, changes in terms of his maturity and ability to command the offense and um, not try and do too much, but also like um, just do what is expected and not try and, throw that 18-point touchdown, which
right.
doesn't exist, right? And so the team knew what they had, even if historically you look at all of his stats and you're like, there's no reason to suspect that this guy's going to be good. But they knew what they had, and they were right. And I still think that having watched what we watched, and he played really well early on, and then it tapered down the stretch, as you said earlier. But there's a lot of factors. Some of it's on Gino, a lot of it's on stuff going on around him in terms of injuries and the rookie offensive lineman like not
Wearing
playing
down.
as well and that kind of stuff. So
Right.
um, I just think that you end up looking at it, and there's definitely a situation where a little bit better talent around him, a little bit more continuity, and he could have continued to play at that higher rate and just been able to continue to be good and would have had significantly better numbers.
Interesting. They wrote me off, but I ain't right back.
Mhm.
That's still true. It's crazy. I expect this similar situation. I think we saw enough of Gino last year to know that that's who he is, and this offense hasn't gotten any worse. On paper, it's gotten better with
It has.
Njigba being added as the third wide receiver. I think we're going to see vast improvement from that spot this year,
Them
and
and having a second running back.
having a legit second running back. Yeah,
Yep, and, honestly, I think that the 2 rookie offensive linemen, whether they start week 1 or they start week 10, somewhere in there, we're gonna get them on the field, and I think that maybe not so this year, it might be a straight, it's as good, but not better. It could be great, it could be much better. The ceiling for the offensive line is so much higher with the 2 kids, than it was last year,
and don't
and
forget Evan Brown's coming in. Guy's got some starting experience,
mhm.
and could even be better than Haynes in a role where he swings around a little bit, both guard positions and center. This could be one of the best offensive lines that we've had and we've seen for
Mhm.
ages. I mean, really, I
I
think
mean,
that comes in to its
th
own.
this year has that potential. Next year, a year from now, we should be talking about this being the best offensive line that they've had since 2013. Because you have all of those guys that are not rookies, and, 4 of them, 2 of them are going into their 3rd year, 2 of them are going into their 2nd year, and they're all good. Like, we're a year from now, I believe that's what we're gonna be talking about, is just how good this offensive line's gonna be, and with that, the sky's the limits for the offense.
Wow. Crazy. All right. Team seems to feel, at least Pete Carroll does, spoken wise, seems to feel a similar way, talks in a similar way about Drew Lock that he does about Geno Smith, being very confident in his ability to operate the offense. Talked about, we believe our offense is geared towards, helping quarterbacks and whatnot. And he almost referred to it in a plug and play kind of a sense, although you don't want to take too much away from Geno, what Geno did. But he seems to feel confident that if something happened to Geno, they've got Drew Lock.
Yeah, I mean, Locke is toolsy. He's got a huge arm. He's a big guy. Um, I even went back to and I was looking at scouting reports and that kind of stuff, and they're like, when he's on, he's a top 5 draft pick. The problem is that he's inconsistent, and every once in a while,
Yes.
there'll be a game where he's just throwing these like darts that are perfect, and then suddenly he'll have 5 passes in a row that sail on him and aren't anywhere close to a receiver, and that speaks to mechanical problems. Well, he's been in the league now
And
for a
mental
while.
game.
He's been in the league now for a while. He's been in this system for a while, and I mean, you kind of see what Seattle did for Geno Smith, right?
Exactly.
If Seattle can do something similar to Drew Lock, and he's a talented guy, he just hasn't played up to his talent level because some of the mental stuff and um, some of it is mechanical, and hopefully they can go through and get some of that stuff fixed. And and then if he's needed, he comes out and can show in the same way that Geno did. He's just a guy's going to end up as a career backup, but maybe there's something there. Um, we'll have to see. You go back and you look at like stats wise. This is a guy who's um, started for a couple of years and is totally a career completion percentage of under 60%. He had 3 really good games as a rookie in 2019. But other than that, he's been pretty mediocre.
And he was, a low completion percentage quarterback in college at Missouri. I think it was always under 62% or somewhere in that range.
Mhm.
Like you said, he's got those moments. He's also got those frustrating inconsistencies and accuracy and touch come into play. Some of that could be mechanical, as you said. You'd think at this point in his career, some of those things have been corrected. Coaches are not immune to recognizing these things as well. So I'm sure they've thrown everything they've had at correcting some of those deficiencies, as well as the mental makeup of the game. Some of those things can be attributed, I think, to the mental side of football. Clearly, you've got the ability physically to do the job. I think where he needed the help the most was the mental side. I don't think Denver really helped him in that situation. They kind of threw him in there and then expected him to kind of be something he wasn't, and he just wasn't ready.
Yeah, and
At this
they
point,
also
he's had a chance to mature for a while, and we'll see. I mean, if
they
he
also
gets a
kept him
chance,
around. They would throw him out there and then then bench him and then sign someone else to replace him, but then keep him around and make him play for 4 or 5 games and then bench him again. It was just weird. The whole situation, it was unstable. It was chaotic, and I don't think it led to him feeling comfortable to dive in and really develop as a player. And he's got a different situation in Seattle. He's not the guy. He was honestly never the guy. Yes, they were giving him a chance to come in and blow them away last year, but you go look at the way they ran things in camp and the way they did stuff in the preseason. Geno Smith, it was his job to lose. He needed to fall on his face, and he never did. He didn't look great in the preseason, but he did enough. And then Locke didn't do much of anything. Then was when he should have had his opportunity to win the job, he had COVID, so that didn't happen. And he came back the following week when they were like, okay, well, we'll just push this competition down the road a little bit. And he threw all those interceptions, and we're like, yeah, this is done. It's the Geno Smith show. Um, and so now Locke's going in. He's going to have another training camp and another preseason, but he's doing all those with no expectation of trying to win a job. He's just the backup here. He can sit there, he can learn, he can watch, he can grind tape, he can work on fundamental things that he needs to work on rather than, trying to manage the team aspect of things. It's a good situation for him to really
It's a good
work on
situation for
improving.
him and for the team. It's
Yeah,
almost like they're trying to duplicate the Geno Smith uh,
they are.
way of developing a quarterback, which is interesting to me. I'm kind of glad that Drew Lock is on the team. Actually, uh, I've wanted the team to invest in a young quarterback that they could develop over a long period of time, and Drew Lock's it. They had an opportunity this year, Keith, with the draft capital that they did have at 1.5 and 120 overall, plus 2 second rounders, future picks if they needed to. If they really believed in the quarterback that was available in this draft, which according to almost everyone was a nice, strong quarterback class, at least at the top, they could have moved around to do that. They could have gone
Mhm.
and secured their quarterback of the future if they wanted to. Apparently, they were very comfortable with the quarterbacks that they have in their system right now. They just paid Geno Smith in a what everyone agrees to is a team friendly deal, and it's interesting. It's allowing the team to build a roster around that position without having to completely heavily invest into that and overpay, if you will, to top of market in the quarterback um, crazy contracts that are out there, and we'll see if it pays off. I think Gino has shown that he can guide a team to the playoffs, and I think if you make the roster better, both on defense, obviously,
Yeah.
and a little tweaks on offense. And we've done that on the offensive side. Now the defense remains to be seen. Have we done enough on the defensive side to win more games with our defense?
Hmm.
And that's really the key to this season as far as getting past 9 wins. I think early look at the schedule, early look at the roster. We've got an opportunity, top end, to win 12 games or so. On the low end, we could repeat where we're at because maybe the center and the guard don't develop. Maybe the defensive line, we just did not do enough to address that spot. And that's going to be our weakness again, and it's going to diminish the entire defense. That's possible. But there is a chance that we did do some things. Maybe there's still a move out there to be made that really kind of finalizes this roster and we can move forward and get deeper into the playoffs. I think we're certainly in a position with Geno at quarterback with this team to compete in the NFC West with San Francisco, considering San Francisco's situation at quarterback. So we'll
Yeah,
find out.
San Francisco's situation at quarterback is going to be interesting. And that defensive line only got better, but I think the rest of the roster is in a situation where Seattle can move up. They can get closer, especially if Geno plays well. Um, and so I don't know if as a roster they're there because the depth is absolutely not there. There's a reason why this team had to sign 25 undrafted free agents, which is like record setting, because they don't have the experienced players on the roster. It's a really shallow team. There's no depth.
You're talking about asking the rookie class to come up big again. Really,
It's
is Zach
more
Sharp?
than just the rookie class. We were also asking, like right now, we're asking a bunch of undrafted free agents to fill some pretty important roles.
Okay, yes. I mean, we'll take a closer look at this roster, final roster as we get closer to training camp and so forth, or in training camp. But I disagree with that in a little bit, only in that I believe that the 53-man roster is going to be filled with all of our draft picks plus all of our existing guys, and maybe one or two spots of undrafted guys have an opportunity to make the roster. If you really look at it, there's really
I
only
don't know.
room for a couple of guys.
If you bring in 25 undrafted free agents, which usually an undrafted class is 8 to 10, maybe 11. When you bring in 25, that's because you just don't have the players on the roster. You don't have the depth. And at some point, those guys because injuries happen during training camp. They happen in the preseason. And every injury that happens for Seattle, that's another undrafted player that has to fill a roster spot.
Yeah, or a vet that comes in that's cut, or whatever. I'm just saying, if you really dig, I think that we're okay. There's a couple of spots, specifically at defensive tackle, where I think that we're light, but everything else actually is not terrible. And we can talk about that as we go through this process in the
Yeah,
next
we
few
will.
weeks for sure. So the last guy that you had mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to talk about Geno Smith and then a couple other dudes. Here's the other dude is Holton Allers, the 6'3", 237-pound undrafted rookie free agent out of East Carolina University that joined the team. They signed him to a contract. One of the probably top 2 or 3 quarterbacks coveted after the draft to be able to sign with teams. And he came to the Seahawks, obviously, maybe looking at an opportunity where Geno's only got essentially a 2-year contract, and Drew Lock's only signed up for 1 year, potentially taking a look at an opportunity here for himself, while the team is also looking at adding a talent there that may have a little bit more. If he played for a larger school, maybe an additional year of production, he would have been looked at in this draft a little bit differently.
Uh, well, yes. At the same time, like NFL.com didn't have any kind of information. He was not part of their prospect database. If you go look at NFL Draft Buzz, they had him a year ago as part of the wrong draft class. And nothing updated since then. He wasn't viewed as a guy that was an NFL prospect. Which, I mean, he's a big guy.
Certainly an
He's strong.
undrafted guy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a big guy. He's strong. There's a lot to like if you look at him statistically, but that throwing motion is kind of gross. And if you've seen, you just go watch some highlights. Him throwing the ball is about as like awkward as you're going to see. The only player with a throwing motion that's similar that has had any NFL success that I can think of is Philip Rivers. And Philip Rivers is like crazy in that there's no way someone with that throwing motion should have been good, but he was. But yeah, I mean, it's like that. I mean, you've got that is a weird
I think
throwing
that's
motion.
mechanically can be fixed. If you take a look at him, I think his throwing motion is natural. Yes, it's a wind up, but I think that you can with proper coaching, I think that you can narrow that down a little bit. He might take 3 seconds to throw now, but I think if you can get it closer to 2.25 or 2.5, I think he's going to be league average in that respect. He's got an opportunity to do that. I think he's definitely going to be a practice squad level quarterback this year, whether it's with the Seahawks or another team. Definitely has the elongated delivery, but there's a lot of positive upside too. I mean, he was very productive in college, had 10,000 yards passing in 4 seasons. He threw more than 3,700 yards last year, 28 touchdowns, 67% completion percentage. So a guy with a really elongated delivery, getting 60%, 67%, that sort of production. There's a lot to like there, a lot to work with. He had also some good receivers, one of which is with Seattle, signed undrafted as well. It's, it is what it is. I don't want to hype this guy up because who knows? Other than I'm a lefty, he's a lefty. He's got some Viking heritage. I'm Norwegian, so there might be a little bit of that, but overall, it's a guy that's going to develop on the back end, and we won't really hear much about it this year other than some training camp throws and possibly a fourth quarter appearance in a preseason game. This guy would definitely be on the practice squad, and potentially just you bring him along if he's really something that they like that works in their scheme. Would come along for next year and maybe compete with Drew Lock for that spot.
Yeah, I think he's interesting because this guy's big and he's really hard to sack. He's mobile for a guy that's his size.
237 pounds.
Yeah, he's about 240, but can run, but he runs kind of straight line. It's not no one's going to confuse him with Lamar Jackson as far as running ability.
But he's kind of like Cam Newton in that way, not quite
I
as
was thinking
fast,
more
but
along the lines
he
of
can
Ben
bulldoze you.
Roethlisberger.
Yeah,
It
he's
reminds
that.
me a lot of Ben Roethlisberger in that he is just hard to tackle. And there's something about that that I find is going to be fun in the preseason because he's going to get some chances. He's going to play some fourth quarters in the preseason because they don't want to have Geno out there for too much time because they don't want him getting hurt. And Locke's going to play probably the second and third quarter of most games. Fourth quarter is going to be on Allers, and I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be interesting to watch because he's big, he's hard to tackle, and he's got a lot of arm strength
Yes.
and it's pretty dang accurate. And once he can get the ball out of his hands, that's the hard part is that windup. But once it comes out of his hands, it flies pretty nice. He's pretty accurate, all of that stuff. So I think he can be a fun player to watch, even if he's a practice squad guy for at least a year.
Right.
But there might be something there, and even if there's not something there, he's an undrafted free agent. As long as it's fun, I'm
Right.
good. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Right. No, and right now he's a camp arm. Let's just be honest. And if he proves that he's got more than that, that's
Mhm.
great for the team. If not, you go find another guy. It's at that level right now. We'll see if that translates to a guy that we almost need to protect. I mean, that would be the best case scenario. That's a good problem to have, is have three quarterbacks on your team that you feel confident with. But we'll find out. I think that we're in good shape, Keith. I mean,
Yeah,
really, Gino at the top. It's all about Gino. This team's
it
going to go
is.
as far as Gino goes, I believe. I don't know where Drew Lock's at. We'll find out if he gets an opportunity. We'll figure it out at that point. But this is Gino's team. He's got some great weapons. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf now, then Njigba, Noah Fant, Will Disley. You've got the running backs now with Charbonnet. I like McIntosh a lot as a guy that you can get out into routes out of the running back spot and help your team in open space. Charbonnet is a good pass catcher out of the backfield as well. We all know about what Walker can do there as well. This
Mhm.
team is in good shape. It's deep at skill positions, and I see them being a top 5 offense with Gino.
They've done a
Um,
good job of, putting weapons around Geno and also, um, the last 2 drafts, getting guys that can play up front in front of him. We know about the 2 guys that were rookie tackles last year. They started, both of them. They both played really well. They both kind of wore down at the end of the season because 'cause they're not used to a 17-game schedule. They're used to a 12-game schedule. Um, But still, I mean, that's something that will come around this year, and hopefully that won't happen with the drop off. But now you've got 2 other guys, like guys in the interior where they desperately needed help,
yes,
and they were able to get help. I mean, I like the guys that they drafted. I think they have a shot to maybe not be week 1 starters, but at some point in the season, I expect them to take over. And the team is giving them every opportunity to come in and win those jobs week 1. They want those kids to win those jobs.
yes, yeah,
Um, they want to have the rookies playing to help them develop in the future because they know they've got talent. They know that that's the future. And if they get in there, and develop, you go into a year from now with 4 really good young players in their second and third year. Um, that's an opportunity to have an elite offensive line.
yeah. I think
That's
last
fun.
year, they basically handed the job to Cross at left tackle. That's fine. He's a top 10
Mhm.
first round pick. With Abe Lucas, they had a competition there with Curhan and so forth, some other guys, Forsythe. And I see that the way they handled Abe Lucas in the same way that they'll handle these 2 guys.
Yeah.
They're
There's
not
guy
going to
they're
hand
not gonna
the starting center spot
Mhm.
to Uli, but he's going to have to earn it, and he's going to have that opportunity. Same with Bradford over at right guard,
Yep.
and we'll find out. And Evans is in that mix as well in both those spots. So if Uli comes in and just takes that center spot within a week, Evan Brown is going to be there to compete with Haynes and Bradford for the right
And
guard
Lewis.
spot, and Lewis. And we'll just, I mean, it's a great competition. It really is. It's a
Mhm.
good problem to have. And if those guys come out and take it, that's the best case scenario for
Well,
Seattle this week 1.
That's what Abe Lucas did last year. Is he came out
Exactly.
and just took the job because the team was really trying to bring him along slower. They were giving a lot of the first team reps to Jake Curran, and then for a little bit Stone Forsythe. You just couldn't keep Abe Lucas out of the lineup. And even though they didn't really want to start week 1 with 2 rookie tackles, he made
He
it
left
that
them
they
no
had
choice.
to. He left them no choice. And if the 2 guys in the interior do the same thing, great. And if not, you've got veterans with starting experience at both those positions. So that way you can bring the rookies along a little slower and let them, work it out, figure it out.
Perfect. All right. So we've done the quarterback group. Next show, we're going to transition to running back. It'll be a fun show as well. Thanks for joining us. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL, myself at NW Seahawk. The show is on its own YouTube channel at Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Look that up. When you find it, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to the show, you can find us on your favorite podcasting platform as well. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.